Well, hello everybody, and my name's Doug Belshaw. We're still waiting for Steve Rieger and Laura Hilliker to join us. I'm slightly ill, I have to say. I've been in bed all weekend, but thankfully this webinar is being run by Steve Rieger of Educators Co-op. So just while we're waiting for them to join us, just a very quick overview of what you can expect today. First of all, the plan for this entire bit of workshop, this entire kind of webinar, is that you can get up to speed on how to design your own Open Badges website, your own platform, and you can get started straight away by thinking about some of the design considerations that we at We Are Open Co-op and Steve and Amy and Jared and others at Educators Co-op have started to think about and got involved with their clients. So you might be entirely new to Open Badges. This might be something that you're pretty familiar with. But either way, we hope that you'll leave this pretty short webinar. We're only going to keep it to about half an hour. We hope that you leave this webinar with some questions, but also with some answers. We hope that you leave here knowing some kind of design considerations about what it is that's going to be good for you to get started with when you're thinking about badging systems. So Steve has joined us. Hi, Steve. Do you want to just introduce yourself, and then we'll see if Laura can join us too.
Okay, great. Good morning. Well, for me, I'm Steve Rieger with Educators Cooperative. We are working with school districts here in the United States and been working in the badging world here for about 5 years now, helping districts put together their websites and put together resources to use in the real world with teachers and students. So we're going to share some lessons learned from some of our mistakes and hopefully save you some time.
Excellent. Okay, so just to buy a bit of context and just to buy a bit of background, we'll give Laura another couple of minutes. So there's a few of us over here in the UK that have joined together to create a co-op. I should say Europe. Laura's based in Germany. A cooperative, for those who don't know, is people who join together without a particular hierarchy usually, and thinking about how they can come together in solidarity to solve some of the world's problems. So we were delighted when we came across Educators Co-op, who are out of California. And one of the principles of international cooperation is that you work closely with other co-ops. So that's what we're doing here. One of the reasons we can get started so quickly with this webinar series is that Educators Co-op have a wealth of experience in using badges in the US, and we do in Europe. So joining forces seems like a no-brainer to us. Laura's just joined us, absolutely right on cue. Hi, Laura, how are you doing?
Hi. Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Laura. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
You're good.
So, Laura, I was just about to introduce you and hope you would join us halfway through my introduction. Do you want to do the honors for yourself? Do you want to introduce yourself?
No, I want you to introduce me, of course.
No, you're choosing yourself.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Hilliker. I am, as is Doug, a founding member of the We Are Open Co-op. And I do a lot of work around education, media, the web, and of course, anything that has to do with participation and community. I do quite a bit of work with Greenpeace.org, and I am a former Mozillian.
Excellent, thanks, Laura. Now, my understanding is that, so we're using YouTube Live, and last time we used YouTube Live, to cut long story short, we didn't use the Google Hangouts feature of it. So my understanding, having done Google Hangout stuff before, Google Hangouts on there, any questions that you ask those people who are watching, if you ask a question, then it should pop up for us within this Google Hangouts area. So if someone wants to test that out now, just by asking a question that they legitimately have, that they've come along with, or just a question like, hey, how's everyone doing? That's great, and we'll see if that works, because we do want to be responsive to your questions. We've got some stuff that we want to go through. Steve's prepared some great stuff, but also we want to make sure that we're responding to any comments that you have in as real time as we possibly can. So if you've got a question, stick it in the chat now, and we'll see if it works. With that, while that's happening, Steve, I think you should have the option to screen share, because I know you've got something prepared. So if you want to get that set up, and we'll see how this works.
All right. So in theory, you should see a little bar graph. You guys see a little image, right? You guys are ready to go?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so as Doug mentioned, we're a co-op here in the United States, and Doug's co-op over there in Europe. And one of our goals is to bring open tools and open resources to the table, give people options. And in working with school districts here in the United States, there are a number of badging systems that are starting to emerge on the market. So there are people selling options to districts to start to use badging sites with teachers and students. What we've been doing this last couple of years is helping districts build their own using open source tools. And that's not instead of, it's just an option. So we would like to have districts be aware that there are many different ways to go toward a badging system. So over here on this bar graph, you'll see on the right, a very simple survey. What are you guys looking for in a badging kind of site or platform? Prioritize, if you will. And so we had some people look at different platforms. Some are vendor-based, some are homegrown, and had them kind of prioritize. These are kind of the top three pieces of feedback. That the vast majority of people want something that's easy to navigate, easy to submit, and that everything they need is right there in the website. When people linked off the website, let's say they were going to go watch a video or they had to go download a PDF, that was okay if it was only a short-term takeaway. When we asked people what they were looking for in a badging website, they typically wanted it to be a self-contained environment, or they wanted it something to be, if anything, a pop-up window, but not a link away. It seemed that the people we interacted with preferred this concept that they were in the website, that they were anchored in some way. That was kind of an insight for us based on some earlier designs. We thought people wanted it to be more of a launching platform. You go to the badging website, and then it would take you to places, and that actually didn't play out when we surveyed people. The easy to navigate, easy to submit, that seems intuitive. That seemed like it made sense. So today's webinar here, what we're here to present are some kind of visual representations of this feedback. And so kind of boiling it down based on this survey and based on some work with real users in the real world, these kind of 4 steps. So whether you're shopping, whether you're thinking, I want a badging platform, I want one for my staff or maybe for my company or for my students or families, these would be 4 things to be looking for. And if you want to build your own, there are a number of open source tools you could use in the same kind of concept. So I'll be walking through these real quickly with a real world website, but essentially that the website itself or the badging platform should have some kind of call to action. I mean, this seems somewhat obvious that if you're on the badging website, that means you probably are there to earn something, or you're aware of the site. That's how you got to it in the first place. But what we have found is that some badging websites have a passive database-like tone where people they show up and they're supposed to search or browse, and that's fine if the person already knows what they're looking for or they already know how to use a badging website. So if you're trying to onboard people, it has to give them a call to pick a link, log in, set up a profile, create an account, some kind of something that makes them engage with the website. A passive database, when our users tried those that were designed that way, they tend to kind of sit there and look. And that sounds good in the short term, but what we observed is over time, they disengaged and they left and they started browsing other places. So some kind of call to action early on.
Sorry to interrupt, Steve. I was just going to ask, have you got a preferred call to action? So the user comes to the website, you've taken ages to design this perfect website. It's pretty easy to set up the badging thing, but you've spent really long time on the kind of user experience. Have you come across any kind of particular words, any kind of prompts which really get people in there? Or are you just saying that basically anything which is verb-based, anything which tells them to do something is good?
That's a great question. And we didn't ask the specific what is the call to action that was the most engaging. That would be a next survey for us to do. So I could guess. But based on the data that we gathered, it was simply something that engaged them to do a thing. So to put it bluntly, they looked across a range of websites. Some of them required them as simple as to create a profile and and to log in. And so that got them engaged in the website. So that in itself was an engaging act for some. Others, it was more of a step-by-step, do this, do that, and they followed the directions. So I'm not sure what the exact triggers are that are best, but that would be a great thing for us to look into next. Maybe we could do that and come back in another month or two and say, this is what we found works the best. We just found that when it was a passive website, there are a couple of open source, and not to, this isn't about one vendor or one platform being better than the other. It's just simply what we saw used when we ran it by people. And when those websites that were 100% open, that were just browsable, surf around, find what's interesting, people tend to get less engaged, or they took longer, or often they just left. They just kind of browsed and left. They didn't actually engage and start a badge. So I don't have a specific trigger, except that they have to do a thing. They have to type a word. They have to click a button. They have to they have to engage with the site early.
Just given that we've got Laura here, who's an expert on community engagement, and not to put you on the spot, Laura, but have you seen in your work, might not be badge related specifically, have you found any particular calls to actions that really engage people, or does it very much depend on context?
Yeah, it very much depends on context, and it's an interesting question, and one that we're looking at quite a bit right now with the Greenpeace.org project. There are different motivations that drive people to action. And so it really depends on what exactly you want people to do. And that in turn influences how you would motivate them to do that specific thing. So with a badge platform, if, for example, you want people to create their first badge, then the call to action is going to need to be something that is like the first step in creating that badge, and also relating whatever it is they're creating to them personally. So yeah, it's very context specific, and particularly with badges, I think it would relate pretty heavily to the types of things that you're trying to badge. So the types of skills and competencies that your badging platform is, or your ecosystem of badges is looking at.
So I'll keep rolling then. Good question. So the call to action be step one, and it sounds like context specific. And Laura, to jump on that thought, make it personal. That also stood out to me as something that you just said that also seemed to resonate with the people we interacted with. They had to engage with the website in a way that made sense to them quickly. And I mean minutes by quickly. I don't mean seconds. But the mouse only lingers for so long. That'll be our tagline. The second kind of lesson learned or observation, if you want to call it that, was this idea of purposeful design. And that seems kind of obvious, but in the badging website world, there are a lot of different perspectives, and I'm sure both of you could speak to this about what purposeful means. I think in the badging framework, purposeful means everything on the screen has purpose. It seemed to us that the prettier the site did not matter, the more functional the site seemed to matter. So there were many sites that we looked at that had designs and art and context and color palettes, and those are all very interesting and engaging, but they didn't necessarily move people into the badging experience. So I'll show you a non-example that we made, then I'll show you an example. So let me see if I can switch this out real fast to the right. Are you seeing my site? You're seeing my website, correct? I'm not sure what you're seeing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can see Cajon Valley Digital Academy.
So this would be a non-example. This was something we built quite a few years ago, and our feedback at the time from the users in this district was they wanted all the information on one screen. And so you will see a very text heavy environment. You'll see a very, very basic web design. You'll see a handful of pictures. You'll see some hyperlinks. This was based on user feedback, what they wanted. They wanted everything over-explained, and they wanted all the pieces of the puzzle laid out. And so we tested this with people. We ran it by people. We had them look at it. It was very linear, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to the end. So on the left-hand side is the process, how to get started. So very, very linear design. And then in the end, they were supposed to submit. They did not have to use these resources, but all the resources were here. And again, all these resources were laid out based on user feedback. They identified that they wanted all these pieces and all these screenshots. This was quite a bit of field testing. In the end, all that field testing did not end in high utilization rates. It did not actually. The very people who helped design it didn't particularly like it.
Steve, that's really interesting, isn't it? So are you saying that you need to be in some way quite opinionated and come in with I mean, I guess you guys have got expertise around the UX UI of websites, you know what kind of works from a badging point of view. So I'm talking with a consultant's hat on here, but there's an extent to which you need to educate the clients. Like, people don't know what they don't know. So pushing back perhaps against what they think they want towards something which you know is going to actually work better, scaffolding people's attention, making things very clean and clear on the first look, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that's what the vendors, if you want to call them that, but if you look on the market as to who's out there doing interesting work in badging platforms, you know, there's a lot of time, energy, and thought that goes into that work. There's a reason why they've ended up with the look they've ended up with. And so I think if you're going to custom build, you don't start from scratch. You don't get people around a table with chart paper, and you don't say, okay, let's talk about all the stuff that you wish you had on the page. Because when you do, you'll end up with too much. I think it's better if you are going to custom build or even take someone else's, that you have some kind of wireframe, that you have some kind of basic layout design, and I can show you how we went from here, and then we can jump to here, and you just automatically feel different as soon as you go from this look. Welcome, here's a video, watch this video, here's some text, here's some contact information. That's that first impression, and this is this first impression. So I think there's a certain visual layout, but there's also a functional layout concept. I think if you have a wireframe that makes a lot of sense, then you can bring that to the table and save people a lot of time. People can then populate what they want within the modules, but I think that idea of design with purpose isn't always the idea of sitting around the table asking people what they think. I think it's often easier to ask people, given this structure, what pieces do you see that would be most important to you? Any feedback or thoughts from the two of you, your experiences in that box?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it is a very important step to talk to the users of the website and ask them what it is that they want. But there's a step between what they say they want, what they think they want, and actually building it into the page and creating wireframes for that. And I think that step is really about the designers and developers looking what people say they want and looking for sort of the high level through lines between what different people say. So there's really like an analyzing function that has to happen before it lands on the page. Because putting everything all on the page in the way that you guys did in the first example, which I would guess is a relatively old example. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. So I think that in the early days of the web, that was kind of like the web design solution. We'll just do everything at once, and then everybody has all of the information. And nowadays, people leave so quickly that they really need some streamlined information to be able to decide what they want to do and actually move through the platform.
So I just think if you're thinking of getting a badging system, you're shopping, or maybe you're thinking of building your own. So the very first thing you want to do is like lay out what is the call to action, how are we going to hook people right away, or if we're shopping, we say, does this platform hook us right away? And then the very second question is this a layout that kind of pulls me in? Is there purpose to this layout? Am I sucked into the deeper pages quickly?
Can I just come in there, Steve, on the call to action and the purposeful design? I think one of the problems I've certainly come across over the last 5 years, like yourself, is that people go, oh, cool, badges, and they want a badging system, but they don't really know why. And when you yourself, who are the badge issuer or creating an environment in which badges are issued, if you don't really know why you want to issue badges, it's very difficult to give a call to action and to do the purposeful design. So although it takes a lot longer to get started, and I know that there's agile development methodologies, but all of those kinds of things start with the why. There's a wonderful book and presentation by Simon Sinek. He talks about start with why. You need to be able to very quickly and easily explain why the particular project that you're starting, in this case badges, is a good idea, and who it's for, etc. And only then have you really got a space in which you can design a purposeful website.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, that's the lack of vision for why they're doing badging is why you get clunky starts, right? Because building the website and laying things out is only as useful as the vision that you're trying to execute. So we tend to work in educational spaces. We tend to work in K-12 school districts, and many of the badging initiatives that we're working on are more traditional professional development moved online. And so their primary motivation is that it's more efficient versus putting teachers in a classroom-like setting for 6 hours. Can't we move some of that content online and make it more efficient? And that makes sense, except that call to action then leads people to say, well, we should load all the resources they'll ever need onto the website, since we're replacing their ability to sit in a classroom and listen to a trainer. So ironically, that mission actually interferes with the design. So their mission is to provide all the resources ever possible so you wouldn't have to physically show up. And then their design principle suffers because then they try to overload it. So to the point about the call to action is not only just like, what are we trying to accomplish organizationally, but what's the user experience? What do we really want this person to feel?
And just on that very quickly, the interesting thing about that, just to follow up what I said earlier and to build on what you've said, is that people will design systems really badly or use commercial offerings poorly and then say, oh, badges don't work.
Right.
As if, all you have to do is just throw them at people. And if they reject them because they don't know what this thing is, or you design the system really badly, then it's the system itself that's at fault. And you could substitute badges, almost anything you want in for badges, and people think that it's not their particular way that they've designed it, but actually the thing itself, which is problematic.
Yeah, that's going to lead us. Oh, go ahead, Laura, sorry.
I just wanted to propose a model that I've used over the years that I learned while I was working at Mozilla. It's called Story, Vision, Tech. And the story is the why. Why are you building a website or an interactive anything, really? And I think that when Doug is talking about the why of a badge platform, or when you say that for a lot of K through 12 teachers or organizations, it's really about the efficiency of having content in a place that people can access all the time, as opposed to having to be in a classroom together. I think that there's a story behind that that's not about efficiency, but rather about learning at a very high level. And so if you can clarify the story, then you can get to the vision of what exactly do we need out of this platform? And then you can start talking about the tech. So the model is really the story, which is like the meta philosophical why are we doing this? And most of the times in our field, it's really about learning and about empowering each other through education. And then the vision is the why are badges the solution, and how does this platform help us? And then the tech is actually the development of that platform.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And that kind of goes back to Doug. I don't know if you did a recap of our last webinar at the beginning of this, because I came in just a little bit late, but I think you outlined the principles of badging well in that last webinar. So anybody listening who might want to wrap their head around your vision, that might be worthy to go back and check some of that visioning language out. That might be helpful.
Yeah, we haven't gone through like what are badges, etc. in this particular one, because we're assuming a certain amount of knowledge and we're focused on the design element. We're also trying to keep them short. So apologies for interrupting you there, Steve. Do crack on.
Which is the perfect segue to the economy of language. So the idea here is that use exactly what needs to be used, exactly when it needs to be used. And every person has their own style when it comes to economy of language, but of course with web design, but really badge design in theory is a more efficient or a focused or a very clean, competency-based, mastery-based, proficiency-based way of thinking. So if you're earning a badge, there's a certain outcome, whether you design it or the person putting the badge together has designed it. But the expectations are there, the resources are there, the timeline is there. So the language should be around the purpose of the design. So again, going back to the non-example, it's so obvious that when you ask the customer, hey, why don't you lay out all the information that you wish was on the page, you end up with quite a bit of information. And this is actually streamed down quite a bit from the original, right? This is actually cut way down. And then if you say, well, but let's actually go to what you really need to get it done, then you're going to end up with a very streamlined look. It's going to be very clean. It's going to be exactly what you need. If you want to read more, you can. If you want to check out the badge, you can. If you want the embedded videos, they're there. They're not necessary. If you want examples, they're there. So the idea is that the language is kind of at point of use. When you need it, it's there. But if it's not needed, it's not there. Also, when we talk about economy of language, we have, in this particular example, access to multiple languages as needed. So I think the idea here is that if you're going to bother to put it up there, make it important to have. Because square footage matters. Sorry, I'm trying to zoom. It's getting a little strange. Square footage matters, and real estate matters when it comes to web-based design, obviously. So you're fighting for space. Go ahead.
I remember somebody. When I was a teacher, I used to have this wonderful head teacher. He was like an Oxford graduate, etc. Really interesting guy, and he once gave me back something I wrote for him, and he said, Doug, what do you say? Clarity of writing is clarity of thought. And I thought, actually, yeah, like if you can keep things really short and to the point, and and say what you need to say in the shortest meaningful space, then you know what you're talking about. Which goes back to the kind of the why, I guess.
Laura, anything you want to jump in on that?
I was just I have my video muted, so you couldn't see me making a face, but I'm pretty sure that that's a Orwell quote, George Orwell. But I'm not. It's trying to remember what exactly the quote was. Clarity of writing is clarity of thought. What Doug said, something like that.
Sounds very Orwellian, right? Okay, good. So economy of language obviously would apply to economy of iconographs, icons, graphics, basically use of visual communicators. So the economy of language, whether it's written text as well as icon-based language. So essentially, it's not just really good web design. The idea of a badging website is you want to engage the person, get them in there for purpose, and then provide them everything they need. There's also a certain pacing issue that comes up with economy of language. We found, and I didn't really know how to express it quantifiably, but we found in interviewing users, they want to feel they want to feel pace. They want to feel like they're making progress quickly. So in a badging website, one of the reasons you want them to have a call to action with purposeful design and economy of language is they want to feel not only that they've been sucked in, but that they're already accomplishing things. So it's right up there with when you get that frequent buyer card and it's already got 2 punches in it. You want to get the feeling that you're already in the flow, and economy of language can help you do that because you're moving through the directions quickly. You're moving through the login process quickly. You've already accomplished that first task or watched that first video. All those things help with pacing, and the psychology of moving through quickly seems to kind of play itself out. And so then that kind of leads to the very final I'm sorry, Doug, you want to jump in?
I just wanted to jump in and say that I think part of the economy of language is actually using simple language. There are a lot of buzzwords that float around the educational technology space, and you don't actually have to use them. And so when you're designing a badge platform, or if you're just talking about badges out there in the world, one of the really important things to do is to use simple language that other people understand, so that your users don't get caught up trying to determine what exactly you mean by this or that buzzword.
Yeah, exactly. The jargon, only jargon that moves meaning forward, not jargon that just sounds good. And I guess that kind of leads to the final. I mean, submission of the badge or completion of the task or the modules or what have you. That basically the submission is the beginning, that you've started something, not ended something. We found that users, when they used a website, they're like, you're done, good job. They felt a sense of closure, but then they moved on. And when you ask them later about the badge, some of them couldn't even remember if they had gotten it or not. It's like, I think I got that one. I don't know if they emailed it to me or not. So there was a certain, those websites that were like, congratulations, now you have your badge. Now you're ready to, whatever. Now you're ready for the next step. You're ready for, share with one more. Take this knowledge and push it forward. Whatever the thing was, upon submission, the next thing that the person experienced was an entry point into the next idea. So that was an interesting design element that seemed to pop out.
Steve, it's not part of this webinar, I know, but just any thoughts on having a place where users, children, adults, whoever, can store their badges, whether it's using a commercial platform, whether it's part of your own site, whether it's a roll your own kind of thing, whether it's storing them or showing them off on a social network. Any thoughts about having a place where users can show off their badges?
Well, I think that's worthy of a whole nother webinar, which I think you alluded to, because especially in K-12 education, where we tend to live, there are a lot of uses for digital portfolios, student showcase portfolios, student presentations. So I think that's a broader conversation. But what we found for adult users, we have not found at this time, and this is a small sampling in the grand world of the world, but that showcases seem to matter a lot for adult users, except at times of transition. And this is building on something you said once, Doug, in a presentation I saw you give out here in California. You said badges are particularly powerful at times of transition. And that made a lot of sense to me. And when I see the world of work, I see job applications, I see people moving in and out of different positions within a company. Yes, badging could have a big role then, but as a repository, as a general, house, where do you keep your stuff? Kids really like that. The badging seems to really matter for people engaged in an academic life cycle. So like students in general, maybe of any age, then the repository seems to really matter. So it's a nice broad conversation, but in our work so far, we found that people like the badge, that's nice, but not to park or stick as a magnet on the fridge or what have you. They're much more interested in the badge now opens up something else. And that goes to some of the lingo, which I think we're going to be covering in the next webinar. But the idea of somewhat of a gamification, that when I get this badge, it opens up this new possibility. Now that I've got this badge, this is what's now possible. So some kind of a pathway concept. But that's where we find people engage. And the reason they want to store the badge is so that they can use it as a ticket of entry to the next phase versus a showcase of past accomplishment. So I think badging is particularly powerful as a future opening experience. Got this badge, now I'm ready for what's next. Versus I got this badge, look at what I've accomplished, congratulations to me. Subtle, but it seems to me that in the designs of the platforms where people are most engaged, when they submit, it's a call to what's next. Versus on platforms where they submit and then they go warehouse and reflect, it didn't leave as powerful as an experience for some of our users. Any thoughts on that, Laura or Doug? You want to jump in?
Yeah, I think it's really important to make sure that it's, like you said earlier, starting something new, and the connection to opportunities is absolutely key. Like you can't expect the badge itself to be the motivation and reward. It's like anything. Anything has diminishing returns. Like I find it with my kids all the time. There was a time when I would take them out for a coffee quite a lot, and towards the end, it was just not a big thing. I was being reminded of that because right before this webinar, I took them to Costa, which is a chain over here, and you should have seen their eyes. Whereas if I'd done that a year ago, they would have been like, "Meh." And it's one of those things where you get diminishing returns if you expect the thing itself to be the thing which motivates people rather than the experience around it. Thinking about the interactions, the human side of it, the opportunities might be linked to jobs, might be promotion, it might be status in somebody's eyes. All these kinds of things are really important in terms of starting something and beginning a journey which is more than just the badge itself. The badge is a signifier of the human experience rather than provoking the human experience, I would say.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I also want to shout out to I just realized Laura Fleming I didn't give her a shout out for the template that I was showing. She does a ton of good work with badging, and you should definitely follow her if you don't. Trying to give any credits. Amy McCammon, Jared McCammon, big designers of the websites we were working with today. So those are my 4 big points today. Let's see. I think
So Steve, if somebody wanted to go into more detail, apart from attend the next webinar, which will be next month, make sure you have a look at weareopen.coop/webinars if you're interested in that. We'll be having one a month with Educators Co-op. If people want to go into more depth than the great 4 steps you've been through there, where would you point them towards?
Oh, that's a good question. I wasn't prepped for the homework question.
Sorry. Have you got stuff on? I mean, obviously they can get in touch with you. What's the best way of getting in touch with you?
Oh, gotcha. You can follow us on Twitter. That's easily enough. And if you're here on the website, you're probably found us somehow. But my email is easy. It's Steve, and then the last name is Rieger, R-E-G-U-R. So Steve Rieger at educators.coop, and then it's just S Rieger or at edcoop. On Twitter, you can follow us there. But in terms of homework, if you're interested in badging, you want to look around, I think I would go shop some platforms online and apply these 4 principles. I would go demo a bunch of badge sites and then just see what you think. Did you feel engaged? Did you feel like there was a call to action? Did you feel comfortable in that space? And I think that's where different vendors have different tones or styles. Some people lean to the more professional, some lean to the more, let's say, almost comical, fun, silly. And you find the space you're comfortable. And then look at, does that match your organization? Is that the tone you're going for? So I would shop.
Thanks, Steve. I'd just like to point out that, oh, could you just mute your thing? I'm getting some feedback in there. So another thing I just want to point out, I know this isn't going to be applicable to everyone. For example, Steve's in California, the other side of the world, but We Are Open Co-op are going to be running what we're calling a badge boot camp in London, hosted by London Connected Learning Centre on February the 15th. We wanted to wait until this webinar to announce that. Tickets are on sale right now. They're very limited, only to 20. So if you get in there quickly, you can get the early bird rate. So if you're on this webinar now, you'll be able to snap them up. We're going to be promoting it on Twitter, and also there'll be people who are viewing this recording after it, and we'll be sending out newsletters, etc. But just certainly, if you want to go into more depth, if you want to apply what Steve said to your own particular context, if you want to build on the expertise that Laura and I and other people in We Are Open Co-op have around badges, then that's a great place to get involved with that. If you can't make that, or if you are too far away from London to make that viable, then do get in touch with us. We Are Open Co-op are at We Are Open Co-op. Co-op is an awkward thing to spell online because you need a dash in it, but it's just We Are Open, then Coop, it looks like. And then weareopen.coop/webinars for upcoming ones, and /workshop for the ones. Laura is Epileptic Rabbit on Twitter, and I am DAJ Belshaw. Laura, any final thoughts?
There's a wonderful little tech fail happening. Oh, you can hear me. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I would like to point everybody to the We Are Open wiki as well. We've listed a bunch of the badge issuing platforms that currently exist. So if you would like to take a look at what other people have built and maybe compare those different platforms, you can our wiki, which we will put with the show notes. And otherwise, friendly.
Great. So finally, thank you very much to Steve for leading this month's webinar. We'll be in touch with details about next month's webinar. If there's something that you'd like us to go into detail about, we've got our plans. We've got a kind of a plan for what we're going to do in each particular webinar. That's subject to change. If you want us to go into depth about anything that you've heard us touch on in this webinar, anything which has come up in your particular context, we're trying to keep them broad and general. For example, not going into depth about higher education or K-12 schools or learning performance in a particular organizational setting. But if that's something you'd like us to cover further down the line, do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. So just being respectful of everyone's time, given that we knew we'd run over, we're now kind of at the 3/4 of an hour mark. We're going to stop there. If you've got any questions, just tweet us. If you're anything like me, you'll have a question as soon as I press stop broadcast. But I'll give Laura and Steve a chance to say goodbye, and then I'm going to press the button, the big red button.
All right. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for your time. We'll talk to you later.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Cheers, everyone. Goodbye.